It's so hot, oh my god. The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris has been called The Devil Wears Prada meets Get Out. But where it actually meets is right in the centre, where the first half of the book is The Devil Wears Prada, and the second half is Get Out. And combined, they make something wholly original and pretty terrifying. The Other Black Girl is everywhere at the moment. It is a big bestseller in the US and the UK, and I am thrilled. I got caught up in the hype. I actually ordered it from the library and it was taking literal months and I just couldn't wait anymore, so I bought a copy. And I was not disappointed. This book has gone right to the top of my list of favourite debut novels of 2021 and favourite novels of 2021 in general. The Other Black Girl is a literal masterpiece and an absolute page-turner that defies genre. Calling it The Devil Wears Prada meets Get Out, there's a problem to it. There's a problem when you compare something to a bunch of other things in general, because a piece of art is its own thing, and The Other Black Girl is very much its own genius work of art. But it helps to have some comparisons in mind, so I get it. And Jordan Peele's Get Out is an amazing film to compare anything to, honestly. The Other Black Girl tells the story of Nella. Nella works as an editorial assistant at a big fancy publishing house in Manhattan called Wagner Books. Her character, as far as I know, is pretty well based on the writer herself, Zakiya Dalila Harris, who is in her late 20s and has worked for several years at a big fancy Manhattan publishing house. And she was inspired to write this book, and so she started writing at her desk, and now here we are. I watched a fantastic little interview with her in Good Morning America, where it was revealed that she actually wrote this book by hand, at least the first draft, which is really old school and really fun. The protagonist, Nella, like Zakiya Dalila Harris, actually grew up in Connecticut amongst mostly white people, and then moved to Manhattan and started working at this really amazing job. But Nella is the only black person in her office until the other black girl comes along. The other black girl is a very powerful and strong and funny and likable and charming woman named Hazel, who's from Harlem. She wears these incredible, beautiful, long dreadlocks. She comes from a job working with magazines in Boston, again, a primarily white place with a lot of problems of racism. And now she's here in Manhattan, and she is the other black girl. Every other person in the office is white, and she and Nella kind of become friends. They try to get along. There's a bit of animosity, and a lot of the book is about microaggression. But the central conceit is that very, very quickly, very shortly after Hazel arrives, Nella finds a note on her desk at the end of her workday. She has no idea who left it there, when it was put there. It's written in Comic Sans, which is weird, and it just says, "Leave Wagner now." As soon as you read it, as soon as you see that in the blurb, you think, surely Hazel left it. As weird as that is, it's the first thing that your brain jumps to, but it also seems so unlikely. And it might not be Hazel, because around the same time that the note is left, Nella has just kind of gotten herself in trouble. Wagner has this white male author that they have been working with for decades. He's a pretty renowned author, and he has written this topical book about the opioid crisis, about addiction in America. And he was encouraged to include a black character in it, but this black character is full of offensive stereotypes, and Nella notices that. She turns to Hazel and says, "Hey, do you think I should say something? Do you think I should bring this up in a meeting and say that this character is just full of awkward stereotypes and it doesn't sit well with me? It's not good representation?" And Hazel says, "Hell yeah, absolutely, you need to mention it." So she does. She does mention it. And the man says that she's accusing him of racism. Then the note appears. So, okay, was it Hazel? Or was it this author? Was it her boss? Because the boss was sucking up to the author. The boss is a white woman. She wants his books to do well. So there's a lot of mystery. The main mystery is who left the note and why. But there's so much more to it. There are other chapters in the book that focus on completely different people, and you really don't know who they are. The very, very first chapter is a kind of a prologue set in the 80s, and the character who is the first-person narrator of that chapter is going to feature later in the book. She's going to come up a few more times. All of these other characters whose chapters are named instead of numbered and are usually written in the first person, whereas Nella's is in the third person, they all factor into Nella's story somehow. even though at the moment they are completely separate to her. They are not friends of hers. They're set at slightly different times, sometimes years apart, other times mere days apart. Oh my god, it's so hot. There's so much mystery going on, and comparing it to Get Out is accurate, but it is impossible for me to tell you why. I cannot give away why it's anything like Get Out. And even saying it's like Get Out feels a bit spoilery, because you know that there's going to be some enormous twist, and you know that it's going to be something pretty catastrophic, possibly even science fiction-y or supernatural. At least that's what I was wondering the whole way through. How bonkers is this going to go? How deep does this rabbit hole go, this mystery? What is the deal with Hazel? Who is she really? There must be something to it. And then you start to think, well, am I just being paranoid? I know this is a kind of mystery thriller, even though it's very intimate and very quiet, and because it's not a big, loud political thriller, instead it's about microaggression in a tiny office space, which is very relatable in its own right. You have to think, am I just being paranoid? Am I expecting something bad to happen? Am I expecting Hazel to turn out to be some strange villain? Is this author some kind of puppeteer and he's orchestrating the downfall of Nella for some strange reason, even though she's just a publishing assistant? You become paranoid. I was more paranoid reading this book than Nella was, even though this is Nella's story and she's the one that these things are happening to, because I've read thrillers before, I've read mystery novels before, I've read science fiction before, and I read these things and then they start to build up expectations and paranoia. And so Nella is paranoid and she's frightened and she's scared. But I was more frightened and more scared because I knew what could happen next. I knew what is a potential twist or turn, or are these things going to happen at all? It's impossible to tell. It's so hot. The Other Black Girl is fantastic, and it's fantastic for 3 reasons, okay? One is everything I just said, the wonderful mystery element and how deep this is going to go and how far it's going to go and what twists are going to come up. The second reason is that it's very topical. It's about race, it's about class, it's about microaggression, and racism is front and center in this book because it's about 2 black women in a majority white job, white office, white industry. It also wonderfully captures the fact that so many of the people that work in publishing are women, and yet the heads of publishing houses are so often white men. I work a lot with publishers all around the UK, small, medium, large publishing houses. I know a lot of names, I talk to a lot of people, and they're all women, but they often answer to men. And Wagner in this book really reflects that. You've got lots and lots of white women in an office, a small number of black women in an office, and the head of the office is a white man. It was perfect. It was a perfect representation of publishing today, and of course the author worked in publishing, might still work in publishing, not sure. She has that experience. So it's wonderfully representative of the issues of diversity in the modern day, in the modern climate of this kind of industry and a lot of different industries in the Western world. So that's fantastic. And it doesn't just do good representation. It follows that up with very, very minor details, minor things about black life versus white life. A great example of this is hair. Again, in the Good Morning America interview, it's referenced that hair is basically a character in its own right in this book. The hair of Nella and Hazel, these 2 women, Nella has this kind of small afro, while Hazel has these incredible dreadlocks. And it's about their styling products, and they talk about hair and the fact that Hazel grew up in this black neighborhood in Harlem and she knows how to treat her hair. And she goes to special salons and she has all these styling products and she has friends who are all black and talk about their hair. Whereas Nella grew up in Connecticut in a small white suburban neighborhood and she doesn't know how to treat her hair. She almost doesn't know how to be black. There's this underlying current of being raised in white culture versus black culture and what that means. And as the book goes on, that idea spreads and grows inextricably. This idea of black culture versus white culture, assimilation and blending of the 2 cultures within human identity and as part of a group, as part of an industry, as part of a capitalist society, it's huge. This blending of black and white, or the kind of unstoppable force, immovable object of class and race divides, it's huge, and it's so well explored in this book all the way through, and it gets better and stronger and more intense as it goes. I loved every minute of it for that reason, because as the mystery grows, as these characters are building and growing, and this thriller aspect, this paranoia is growing, so are the racial themes. It's something that is growing thematically as it grows as a piece of genre fiction. It's amazing how well it escalates. The plotting and the characters and the events, everything gets more intense, and so do the thematic punches. Amazing. And the third reason it's such a great book is because of how well it's written. These characters are so well realized. As I said, Hare is a character. Wagner, the publishing house, is a character. Even New York City kind of feels like a character. And every single white woman in the office and the guy who's the head, Richard Wagner, the head of the publishing house, these people are all very complex characters, but only as complex as they need to be because they are supporting white people in a black woman's story. And so Hazel and Nella really do take center stage. The mystery surrounding Hazel and who she is and who she might be, and whether there is any mystery at all, and whether or not you're just being paranoid, this all comes from the fact that Hazel is such a fantastically well-written and well-rounded character. And Nella is such a lovable protagonist. In stories like these, in these kind of mystery thrillers, it's very easy for our central protagonist to be boring, to be bland, to be a surrogate protagonist, one that you kind of just project yourself onto. But that is not the case here, not with Nella. Nella is a very specific kind of person. As I said, a black protagonist in a white job, surrounded by white people, growing up in a small town. So her identity is constantly brought into question. Her relationship with blackness, with whiteness, with black culture, white culture, it is at the forefront of this. She has a black best friend who she relies on, and then as the story goes on, she sort of leans on her more and more. It's fascinating. Nella's relationship with her own cultural and racial identity makes her such a compelling protagonist. She is not boring, she is not idle, she is compelling. And of course, Hazel is some kind of spanner in the works, potential villain. You don't know. There's no way of knowing. You just have to keep reading, and you have to wonder if you're being paranoid. Is the enemy white culture? Is the enemy the white people surrounding Nella? And Hazel is used as a scapegoat, as a thing that Nella thinks is bad, but actually the enemy is whiteness, because that's what I kept thinking. Or is it Hazel? Is there going to be some enormous twist about Hazel? You don't know. Maybe it's both, maybe it's neither. The paranoia grows and grows and grows, and it is intensely compelling. The Other Black Girl is now one of my favorite books of 2021. It is utterly masterful. Not a single page or chapter is wasted. Everything is so well plotted, it's dynamic, it's intense, and it grows and builds as it goes. There is not a brick out of place in the very solid foundation of this book. I don't know if foundations are made of bricks. I don't know. I don't know what foundations are. The point is, this is a fucking great book. This is a fantastic book. It is faultless. I love it to pieces. Oh, it's so great. This is a strong new favourite of mine for 2021. Please do not miss out on reading The Other Black Girl. Please read The Other Black Girl and subscribe for books.